Hello, prep school parents. My name is Mrs. Shivers, and along with Mr. Codd, we're heads of PSHE, EDI, and community engagement. I hope that you'll find this session really helpful. It is an RSE session, that stands for Relationships and Sexual Education. The purpose of this session is to inform you of our curriculum, to inform you of the vocabulary and terminology we'll be using within those sessions so that you can use similar vocabulary with your children at home. And you're also aware that it's from these educational sessions that this vocabulary might be brought up at home. And just to give you an idea of how our sessions will be run. I really hope that through this, you will feel much more at ease. We really appreciate that this can be sensitive material, that you may be concerned about your children going through these sessions. So I really hope that you feel much more at ease and much more equipped after this session. And then in the live session, we also gave the opportunity for parents to ask any questions that they might have afterwards. Please, by all means, feel free to contact myself or Mr. Codd using the mail at. We will happily respond to you via email. If you prefer to talk on the phone or in person, we will of course make the time to do that. So it is a sensitive topic, and I do appreciate that. I really would like to stress that sexual education is only a very small part of our relationships unit, and that unit itself is a very small part of PSHE. But as I say, I hope that after this session, you'll feel more comfortable and it will alleviate some concerns that you may potentially have. The RSE slides are in conjunction with the statutory science curriculum. We are using scientific terminology and scientific illustrations. We've also carefully considered our units, and we've thought about our community. Are all of the subjects that we are broaching suitable for our community? And in some cases, we have thought no, and we have thought some of the lessons suggested for Year 5s are more suitable for our Year 6 children. So the schedule, I'll briefly explain what PSHE stands for. I'll briefly explain what RSE looks like in prep. You will see examples of the Year 3, 4, 5 and 6 learning intentions and the vocabulary that we'll be covering. I'll explain what precautions we're taking and how the children will be safeguarded, and also in terms of questions, just a reminder of how you can contact us afterwards about those. So PSHE, it stands for Personal, Social, Health and Economic Education. Below, you can see the 6 units that are covered in PSHE. They include friendships and being a good friend, differences between cultures, people, personal safety and also e-safety, death and loss, physical and mental health, and as you can see, only one of those units is RSE, which stands for Relationships and Sexual Education. So RSE is taught across the school each year. This is usually in summer 2, so that is our final half term of the academic year. It is a compulsory part of the school curriculum, but as I mentioned previously, we do tailor the content. We really think, how can we make this bespoke for our children? And myself and Mr. Codd are really confident that the lessons and the order and the subject material is suitable for our children in each year group. So let's begin in Year 3. On the left-hand column, you can see that LO, the learning objective. The next column, you can see the key vocabulary that will be used. And then in purple, the PSHE learning intention, and then the social and emotional learning intention as well. So the first session here is to do with how babies grow. It's to understand that everyone is unique and special. It is also to think about humans as well as mammals, obviously us being a mammal as well. So we talk about animals as well, how they go through lots of changes from birth to when they're fully grown, and also to understand that it's the female who usually has the baby. Leading on from that session, you can see that the next learning intention is to express how they feel when change happens. Here the children will be learning about what babies need to develop in the mother's uterus, but you'll also see under our key vocabulary section that there are much more holistic words as well, like love, affection, and care. The next lesson is thinking about the changes that they might see within themselves, so outside body changes. Here, some of our key vocabulary will be change, puberty, control, breasts. And then you can see in the purple, I understand that boys' and girls' bodies need to change so that when they grow up, their bodies can make babies. There is no talk whatsoever about sexual intercourse here, and we do make it very clear that this is a personal choice that adults may make when they are older. And to identify how boys and girls' bodies change on the outside during this growing up process. So this is the introduction towards puberty and children being aware of how their bodies will change as they are going through puberty. We will be discussing things that the children can't control and things that the children can control. So for example, if you'd like to pause, you can have a look here. We have things like starting new hobbies, and we'll be discussing how that is a choice that you might choose to do. Whereas something, for example, like growing underarm hair, how that is something that will happen to all children as they go through puberty. So they know what to expect. They feel really equipped and understanding and prepared for those changes that will happen. Our next session in Year 3, understand and respect the changes that they see in other people. So these are inside body changes. And we're going to be talking about why these changes are necessary so their bodies can make babies when they grow up. So you can see in the key vocabulary here in blue, puberty, male, female, testicles, sperm, penis, ovaries, egg, ova, womb, uterus, vagina, and breasts. Again, very scientific vocabulary that is being used. And shortly you'll see some scientific illustrations that will be used as well. So here are our scientific illustrations. As you can see, the children, as we go through years 3, 4, 5, and 6, you'll see that the children are used to seeing these scientific illustrations. They have been used throughout the school as the children are learning the correct terminology for the exterior parts of the female and male body. The next session is to know who to ask for help if they're worried about any changes. And we'll have a discussion here about stereotypes. Stereotypes to do with males and females, roles and tasks, and really the children reflecting on those stereotypes. Are they true? Where have they come from? Can we challenge some of those? So I can start to recognize stereotypical ideas I might have about parenting and family roles. I can express how I feel when my ideas are challenged and might be willing to change my ideas sometimes. And then we're thinking about the transition to the next year. Our year 3s transitioning into year 4, that excitement that they might have and looking forward to going into a new year group and them expressing that. But also at the same time, they might be feeling some anxiousness and nervousness, perhaps about having a new classroom, a new teacher, the challenges of the new curriculum. So here we've got an overview of year 3. You can see those 6 lessons and only 2 are relationship sexual education lessons. Moving on to year 4, to understand that everyone is equal and special. And the purpose of this session is to talk about how one's personal characteristics come from their birth parents and to be introducing the idea of through genes. And the children understanding that genes are the making up of the egg from their birth mother and sperm from their birth father, and how those make us personal, unique, and our characteristics special to us, and how a real celebration really of ourselves and that we're special and unique. Again, expressing how they feel when change happens. So here we expect the children to be able to correctly label the internal and external parts of male and female bodies and have an understanding that these are necessary for making a baby. As you can see in green, it's really specifying here that having a baby is a personal choice for adults. In blue, you can see the scientific terminology that we will be covering in that lesson. I'd like to specify here that although we are talking about conception, that is literally the making of a baby through sperm and egg. There will be no talk of sexual intercourse whatsoever. There is just an understanding that for a baby to be made, to be conceived, for conception to take place, there needs to be a sperm and an egg. And again, this is the illustration that the children would see, very similar to illustrations they've seen previously, nothing graphic. In year 4, to understand and respect the changes that they see in themselves. So here, this session is going to be an teaching input with all of the children, boys and girls together. And then we will go into gender-based groups where the girls will have an opportunity to speak in a slightly smaller gender selective group, and they will be able to ask questions which the adults will address the answers to. And similarly, the boys will be in a separated gender group for this. So all together for the teaching input and then separated into boys and girls. I can describe how a girl's body changes in order for her to be able to have babies when she's an adult, again, if that's her choice, and that having periods is a natural part of this. So again, we'll be talking about puberty, we'll be talking about periods, we'll be talking about some of the products that females will be using during that time. And you can see that vocabulary list there in the second column. We've got our scientific labeled illustration there that the children will be seeing. The next session, to understand and respect the changes they see in other people. So we're thinking here about words like circle, seasons, change, and control. I know how the circle of change works and can apply it to changes I want to make in my life. I'm confident enough to try to make changes when I think they will benefit me. A much more holistic lesson, not an RSE-based lesson. To know who to ask for and to ask for help if they are worried about change. So we're thinking about emotions here. We're thinking about things they can and can't control, thinking about changes and acceptance. So in purple, I can identify changes that have been and may continue to be outside of my control that I learnt to accept. I can express my fears and concerns about changes that are outside of my control and know how to manage these feelings positively. So it's us explaining to the children and reminding the children who are those safe, trusted adults that they can speak to, that we will always make time to listen to them, that they know that there's a range of different ways that they could speak to an adult, whether they'd like to do that in a written form, whether they'd like to speak to us face to face, if they would like to put their hands up in a group situation, or whether they'd like to ask to speak to us in a more private, smaller group. And then looking forward to change as well, thinking about, again, that transition to the next year, year 4s moving to year 5s, what they're looking forward to, all of the excitement that might be in their minds, goals that they're setting for themselves, but also having the opportunity to express any nervousness or anxiety and giving the adults an opportunity to try and alleviate some of those fears. So as an overall year 4, this unit will discuss fertilisation, people choosing to have a baby, and terminology like sperm and egg from an ovary in order to make a baby, but it will not discuss sexual intercourse or how fertilisation takes place. And as you can see in those 6 sessions, there are only 2 RSE lessons. Moving on to year 5. So year 5, through the scheme that we're using, suggests that we talk about sexual intercourse. We feel that that is not suitable for our community, so there will be no talk of sexual intercourse as a way of conception taking place until year 6 for our cohort. So in year 5, again, to understand that everyone is unique and special, but there's a particular focus here on self-image and body image. We'll be talking about self-esteem, perceptions, we'll be talking about social media, and being very aware of their own self-image and their own body image, and to think about their own self-esteem, and to be really critical viewers of images that they might see on social media or through publications. And we'll be talking a lot about the editing of those types of images and how they may not be often the original image. Express how they feel when change happens. So this will be a focus on puberty for girls. Again, it will be an input with mixed gender, and then going into single sex groups for further discussion and opportunity to ask questions, to explain how girls' bodies change during puberty, and to understand the importance of looking after yourself both physically and emotionally. Again, our scientific illustrations, vocabulary, and labels there if you'd like to pause and have a look. Then again, it'll be both genders for puberty for boys for that teaching input, and then going into gendered groups. So here you can see that we have got the puberty for boys in the second column going down, and some of the key vocabulary that we will be covering in our curriculum content there. I would like to just highlight as well that in these sessions for years 5 and 6, there will be both a male and female member of staff in those sessions. I'd also like to add in that they will not be the timetabled 40-minute sessions. They will be over a longer extended session so that the children have lots of time in order to digest the information, have really purposeful discussions, be reflective, and have the opportunity to ask questions. Again, you can see a scientific diagram that will be used, and again, the vocabulary that we have previously discussed. So as I mentioned, there was a session in year 5 that discussed sexual intercourse that has been moved to year 6, as myself, Mr. Codd, and SLT believe that is much more suitable for our children and our cohorts. So children will have the opportunity to ask questions anonymously. Staff will really carefully consider which questions to answer. Some may be answered to the whole class. Some, if they are more personal, may be answered to that one child. We will address any misconceptions. We will clarify things that the children would like to be clarified, but it will be really sensitively conducted. And of course, some questions may not be suitable, either because they're not age appropriate, or if the questions themselves are not suitable in nature, then they won't be answered. And then you can see in year 5, again, there's more talk in terms of the children transitioning to different years, looking ahead, their milestones, thinking about their emotions as they're looking ahead, and the mix of those emotions. So just a reminder, that unit will not discuss sexual intercourse or any sexual acts. Here you can see the 6 sessions, and again, only 2 are RSE lessons. Then for year 6, to understand that everyone is unique and special, again, we'll be talking about self-image, self-esteem, real self, celebrity. And we'll be thinking about the children. And again, as I mentioned, quite similar. It's a spiral curriculum. So we're building on the prior knowledge from year 5 of being a really critical viewer. Those celebrities' images that you are seeing online, letting the children know, often heavily filtered, photoshopped, not the original image, so that the children can be mindful of that when they're thinking about their own self-esteem and self-image. We will be talking about how girls' and boys' bodies change during puberty, and understanding again the importance of looking after themselves both physically and emotionally. We'll be thinking about the opportunities, freedoms, and responsibilities that they might be having, how those might be changing as they get older. Year 6 is the only time that sexual intercourse will ever be part of a PSHE lesson and an RSE lesson at school. And this will only be taught in the context of conception. So where the children have previously in prep understood the concept of conception, where a sperm and an egg are joining to make a baby, Year 6 is slightly developing on this idea in that they are understanding that that conception takes place through sexual intercourse. So here you can see in that conception lesson, I understand that sexual intercourse can lead to conception, and this is how babies are usually made. We are also touching on the fact that sometimes people need IVF to help them have a baby, and there will be several scenarios where that will be discussed. For example, some fertility issues, but we will also talk, for example, about same-sex couples. The key vocabulary you can see here: relationships, conception, sexual intercourse, fallopian tube, fertilization, pregnancy, embryo, umbilical cord, and IVF. So here's an example of the lesson. So it is this scientific and scientific. Sexual intercourse, the penis entering the vagina, is something that can happen between two adults who both want this to happen. They give their consent to each other to have sex. Sexual intercourse is performed when trying to make a baby. No one in any relationship should ever do anything with their body they feel unsure of or uncomfortable about, and nobody should ever feel pressured into having any kind of sexual relationship. So again, we're talking about the children and consent, understanding that terminology, and also purely in the context of when trying to make a baby. Of course, we're thinking about EDI, we're thinking about being an inclusive community, and we want all children to feel valued and included. We want them to understand that while sexual intercourse is a way that sperm fertilizes an egg, in many cases, there are occasions where this may not be possible, such as medical reasons or same-sex relationships. So a reminder about Year 6, topics that will be covered: relationships, conception, sexual intercourse, and then the rest of the vocabulary you can see there. But the lessons will not discuss any other sexual acts except for sexual intercourse, and there'll be no discussion of sexual intercourse for pleasure. Sexual intercourse will only be discussed in the context of conception. And then the children, similar to the previous years, will be discussing moving on into secondary school, their transition, how they're feeling about that, and having the opportunities to express how they feel about those responsibilities, about those opportunities, about those changes of moving to a different school, their hopes and dreams for that, their excitement, but also be able to share some of their fears and maybe anxieties about those changes as well. So here in Year 6, you can see an outline of the 6 sessions, and only 2 are RSE lessons. So in Years 5 and Year 6, there will be 2 adults of different genders in the room at all times. In Years 3 and 4, there will also be 2 adults in the room, but they will not necessarily be gender separated. Parents, you will be informed of the date that these sessions are taking place, of the RSE sessions, and you'll be informed again of the vocabulary and terminology in advance of the lessons. Myself and Mr. Codd, as PSHE leads, have given detailed briefs to all teachers on how they are to conduct the sessions, and all questions will be very carefully considered and answered. They will be taking place in the second half of the summer terms, that is the final half term of the academic year. And as I said, you will be aware of those sessions in advance. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this. I hope you have found it informative. I really hope that it has alleviated some of your fears, and I hope that parents can really see how linked to the science curriculum, the statutory science curriculum this is, that we have carefully considered the content as a school. And I really hope that you feel really aware now of what the sessions will look like, what your children will be covering, and the vocabulary that will be being used. If you have any questions, myself or Mr. Codd will be happy to email you if you would like to email us on the mail at. If you would like to email us to make a time to meet in person or to have a phone call, more than happy to answer any of your questions and discuss that further.